Hey guys, what's up? threads13 here for deucescrack.com, coming to you today with another episode of threads13. And this is another one kind of in this little mini series where we're talking about things that we can do to improve our win rate at the micros. And specifically, things that I think most people are not doing that's giving them trouble moving out of the micros. And as we kind of discussed in the previous two videos, the rake is a little bit higher at the micros and that can cause some problems. But the flip side of that is people are making a lot more mistakes at the micros. So there's a lot more potential profit for you to be able to clear that rake. So in the previous two episodes, we talked mostly about playing versus fish and finding spots for us to be barreling them off of hands. And I think that's a pretty big deal because one, you'll be playing versus fish pretty often. They're not 90% of the player pool for sure. But very often there'll be half of the guys sitting at the table have a VPIP over 30. And probably over 40. And so it's important for us to make sure that we kind of get all the EV from them that we can, since we're going to be so frequently playing against them. If half of the time you're not maximizing your profit, then, half the time you're sitting there at the poker table, you're leaving a lot of profit on the table. If you weren't playing versus fish very often, then it wouldn't be as big of a deal. So that's why I kind of wanted to start on that. This one is a little bit more, can work either versus fish or versus tags, but more specifically in this episode, I have tags in mind for you to sort of be deploying these ideas against. And this one is changing your bet sizes. And so let's go ahead and jump into it. And one thing I want to point out is I think this is kind of a groupthink thing that happens again, and also just a matter of just getting into a habit from when you start learning to play poker. Because when we start learning to play poker, we're going like, this game is really complicated, and we're just trying to, not screw obvious things up. Things that will, after 6 months to you will be rather obvious. Don't open queen 3 suited under the gun. Like, first we have to learn that. And then, so we have to get some basic ideas on bet sizing too. So don't, c-bet min to, in general, that's not going to be what you want to do. Don't c-bet 5 times pot for that matter. In general, that's not going to be what you want to do. So we start kind of getting these sort of rules that are saying, and bet this amount. Usually that would be something like bet 2/3, bet 3/4, bet this amount on this flop, bet this amount on this flop. And for heaven's sakes, don't bet smaller than half pot. So we're kind of taught this from the second we get in there. And I mean, and this is the case not with poker, but with anything. I mean, when you're taught something from the beginning, it becomes very difficult to kind of get outside of that. It just becomes like such a habit. And your brain kind of becomes indoctrinated to it. You just do it and you don't even think about it. So that's kind of my goal today, is kind of give you guys a little bit of food for thought. And that's really what I'm trying to do with this series, is I don't want to sit here and I don't want to spoon feed, here's every single flop that you should bet small on, or every single river, or whatever. I think that's not good. But what I want to do is give you some ideas of some situations where you can be thinking about betting small. And I don't think I mentioned that yet. So the idea is going to be finding some spots where we can use some small bet sizes to our advantage. So, and a point on that is that that's the thing, is that sometimes your villains will not call if you bet a good amount, but you're really, really confident and saying, well, I've got the best hand here, like always. So there's, and even by chunky bet, I mean, like, even if you bet like half pot, it's just, your opponent has a really weak hand, and your hand is okay, so you know you have the best hand via hand reading, but there's just no way you can get the guy to call it. And in these situations, you're allowed to bet smaller than half pot is kind of the thing here. You don't have to bet, you don't have to bet 2/3 pot. You don't have to bet half pot, and that's the thing at the micros. So usually what you're gonna, and I can maybe even hear it in your guys' head, throwing up the red flag going, but no, I'm telling you my hand. But the thing is, you're playing, and what we're looking for are situations where your opponent is really unlikely to have anything. And that's the thing with the guys that are playing the micros a lot, is they don't go from, I don't have anything, to, oh my God, that guy bet small, let me bluff raise him, a very high percentage of the time. So do they some percentage of the time? Sure, I can't say that they do it zero. But they do it rarely enough that you can get away with making these small bets and it be higher EV than just checking. So, and so that's the big thing I'm getting at there, is don't fret about it. There's just very, very few players that are going to take this sort of information leak that you might give by making a small bet only with mediocre hands. And this is kind of just you'll be a little more clear what I mean when we get into some hand examples. Is if you're in a situation, you have the best hand, but you're worried that if you make a small bet here, you never have a huge hand, and he could raise you, and oh no, this guy's falling. Guys really aren't going to do that at these stakes. They really, really aren't, on average. So, and of course, if you get raised, what do? We take a note. So it's okay to take that risk. And what you're going to do, I think, is see that, you can just, you can just find a couple spots where you can make 2 BB more, 6 BB more, and that adds up if you find one of those, two of those every 1,000 hands even. That kind of can become a big deal. Two of those worth 3 BB every 1,000 hands, 6 per 1,000. What is that? Per 100, half a BB-ish. So, that's a pretty big deal to add a half a BB to your win rate through just a couple spots where you're making a bet with is probably the best hand with a rinky-dinky bet size. So let's go ahead and we will jump into the examples now. Okay, guys, we're back. So the first hand I want to take a look at here is this hand King King, and this is just, I feel like this replayer is a little harsh on the eyes, but honestly, I haven't done a whole bunch of just using replayers to create hand histories in my life. So let me know if you guys know of any that maybe look a little cleaner. It's like all red and kind of bright. So that's just me. Maybe you guys don't mind. So, okay. So the first hand we got raised King King, under the gun, and, we get called by the button, and everyone else folds. So, okay, so, I won't spend too much time, dealing with, the decisions earlier in the hand, but I do think the flop check here is, pretty easy. I think betting here is a pretty clear mistake in these sort of situations. It's just a situation where, you're basically going to lose the hand every time you get called. So unless your opponent happens to have 10-10 and then you check it down. So I would just go ahead and check here on the flop. And we're happy to just check call. We can certainly get our opponent to bet some hands that we're happy about him betting. And he's gonna have a hard time continuing to bet on this board because it's okay for us to check call with some aces. So we check and opponent checks. So this is kind of immediately a key in my mind that, of course, I can take some bigger hands out of my opponent's range when he does some stuff like this. Usually he'll be betting with things like 6-6-4-4, and I block ace king. He might have 3-bet ace king. And he would probably bet it. Most people will bet most of their aces when you check here. I wouldn't be shocked to see somebody check back an ace in this situation when you check, just them kind of putting you on a weak hand and deciding to slow play. So we do go ahead and check again on the turn. The 4 on the turn is pretty innocuous. Makes 4-4 a little harder, but we weren't really a whole bunch worried about that in the first place. And there's not a whole bunch of 4s in his range otherwise. At least there shouldn't be. And if there is, good for us. He's calling us pre-flop with probably too many hands. So, when we get called, we're just in better shape. So cool. So we check and it goes check again. So now I'm really, really, really thinking this guy does not have an ace. And if he doesn't have an ace and he doesn't have 9-9, we pretty much have the best hand. I'm also, however, thinking that it's fairly likely that he does not have anything that great. At best, we're going to be looking at like a jacks or tens kind of hand. We could also just be looking at a complete airball, although a lot of times his airballs will bet somewhere. Certainly if he had flushes, very likely if he had backdoor flushes, but if he just had king, queen of hearts, he might have even, well, he can't have that. We have king, queen, we have the king of hearts. So say queen, jack of hearts. He would probably even bet that either on the flop or on the turn. So a lot of times our opponent has showdown value here, so we have plenty of stuff we can get called by. So this is a spot where I like making a small bet, and we can do something like that here. I bet small on the river here, or I guess I didn't bet small, but I suggest to bet small. And villain calls and shows a 7-7. So that's the sort of stuff that I expect to see in this sort of situation here. And that's the thing is like, if you bet there's 375 in the pot, if you bet 250, it really maybe he calls, it kind of starts becoming one of those sort of things. Whereas in this situation, if you bet 1, he's not folding very much. People just go, I'm not folding to that amount. So I think this is a good bet size for use here, is to actually bet somewhere in the neighborhood of, min bet to 150. And we basically can just get called all the time. And we basically have the best hand always. And like I said, we don't, I think, have to worry about getting raised, by a hand like this. He'll just call. And then we'll take a couple extra BB and be pretty happy about it. Okay, guys, so I have another hand for us to take a look at here. So let's go ahead and jump into this one. This one's pretty straightforward pre-flop. We just raised to 2.5 BB on the button, and villain calls into big blind. He checks to us on the flop. We bet 175, and he calls. So not a lot to say there. The turn comes a king. So let's talk a little bit about what we want to do on the turn here. So a lot of guys bet here on the turn, and I think that's a mistake. And a lot of the thoughts are, well, we got to get value, got to get value. And yes, I'm saying that a little bit to kind of tease it, because this is a little bit, there's a little bit of an obsession with value. And it's actually kind of funny, because a lot of the tags that you're playing against are all about not giving you value. So you're trying to get value from them while they're not giving you value. So basically what happens is, you are just only getting paid by the top of their range. So one thing I would say is, I wouldn't necessarily expect villain to fold a 10, but if you sit down and think about it, there's not a whole bunch of 10s that you actually beat, in this situation. So 10-9, offsuit and suited, sure. And 10-8 suited, but probably not offsuit. And most guys that you're playing against aren't going to be hanging around there with the old 10-2 suited and 10-3 suited. You know, 10-7 suited is probably fair for them to have. It depends a little bit on the tightness of the guy that you're playing against, but I wouldn't be too shocked to see him fold a 10-7 suited preflop. Not condoning it, but I would not be surprised at all. If you made me make a bet on it, I would bet that he folds it. So, whereas if you look at the tens that we are behind, we're of course behind Queen 10, King 10, and Ace 10, and there is some possibility of sets that didn't raise the flop. Now, yeah, we're ahead versus draws, but if you've been watching and following along with these videos, you'll know that there's actually not very many of them. So there's a lot more better tens than there are draws, especially when we have the 10 of hearts in our range and block some draws. So, and when you start, and another thing that you might be thinking about is like, well, 9, 9, 8, 8, and 6s. But now when the king rolls off, when you're playing versus a tight player, you might just get them to fold that hand. So if we bet here on the turn to get called, we're not in that great a shape. And another point about draws is they usually miss. And if your opponent bets on the river, you can happily call. So yeah, you give them a free card, but you can get them to bluff when they miss. Yeah, you probably end up paying them off when they hit. But not a huge deal. So I like just checking here. It's just not a situation where our hand is actually as good as what it seems. It's just a pair of tens. And it doesn't have a particularly great kicker. Not horrible, but not particularly great kicker. And I think going and betting again here on the turn is just betting too wide. So I strongly advocate checking the turn. And we do check. And then pretty much a dud comes off on the river. Your opponent could have 6-5, but he checks. And could have 5-4, but he checks. Could have 5-5, it'd be a little squirrely of a call on the flop, but it could have it, but he checks. Could have King 10, but he checks. So we're taking those sort of hands out of people's ranges because people were very, 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 very rarely going for a check raise with those sort of hands here. And another hand that I didn't mention is 8-7, which is possible, but he checks. So we're confident that our hand is the best hand now. So now we can be thinking about making a bet. However, we need, like I was kind of talking about before, we kind of need him to be calling with some things less than a 10 here. Because if he's only calling with his 10s, it's just a check. And that's the thing. If you bet like 4, maybe even if you bet 3, I don't know, you get called by like 9-9. And ideally, we'd like to be able to get called by a 6x range for that matter, too. So this is similar to the last hand, only we've got a middle pair hand, and we're, getting some extra money out of it. Only now, we're doing it with a little bit less obvious of a spot, and also kind of gives me an opportunity to talk about checking the turn. So now when our opponent checks, we go ahead and bet 2 into the 6, and he calls us with the 10-7 suited. So cool. So let's move on to the last hand. Okay, guys. So this will be the last hand we'll take a look at. And this one's going to be a little bit briefer to talk about. Again, we got kings under the gun. And we raise, and like before, button calls. And like before, we get the ace-6-4 flop, and we checks through. Turn is a 4. So this is literally going to be the exact board texture. Turn checks, river's a 9, and we bet. Now this time, villain folds. And we, of course, take down the pot. So now the thing that I want to talk about here, is we have now seen that our opponent folded in a situation where he was pretty likely to have some sort of showdown value. And so what we should be doing is opening up the notes to take a read. Because now we know that we can make this bet size as a bluff. So it's not only do we, every time we make this bet size here, is it just, oh, we have a mediocre hand. Now, I will say we should probably start by doing this with hands that are looking for a call, because for the most part, people tend to not fold to rinky-dinky bets. Especially in situations where they probably actually have something to literally call you with, some sort of showdown value. But this situation has shown us that it's either our opponent folded showdown value. Now, it might be 2-2, but showdown value nevertheless. Or he is not the type of guy who will fight for a pot with you. He either had like 2-2 or 5-5 or 3-3 and didn't call you, or he had like Queen Jack and couldn't call you. Or Jack 10, you get the idea, those sort of hands. Which means that he didn't bet it on the flop, which is very helpful to know too. Because that can really affect how we want to play when we check and face a bet. So we didn't get to see his hand here, but it actually told us a whole bunch. So this is, I'm bringing this up because when you make these small bets, sometimes they don't even work out for the intention that for your original intention, but you get a lot of information out of them accidentally. And I don't mean information like betting to find out where you're at kind of information, which is usually pretty bad. I mean more betting and you find out how your opponent constructs his ranges and plays poker, which is like really helpful, and is like a future, allowing you to construct your own ranges better in the future and maximize your EV more, and exploit him for more. So what I might do here is a couple adjustments now that I've seen this. Is one, when I happen to check the flop here, and I've got some sort of airball. Airball could be Jack 10 of hearts. I might just check the flop and give up to him on this sort of board texture, and check again on the turn, and then bet the river for just, 2 BB, and know that he's going to fold there really often, or not even know, but have a good idea that that's going to happen. And what also might happen is, now I don't know if I would immediately make this adjustment, but I'd be looking to make this adjustment, is I would be really curious about his betting frequency when you check to him on the flop. And you can have, a lot of you guys probably have the stats for that in your pop-ups and what have you. And, if you start seeing that he's not betting very often, and you've got this read that he folded the river, which seems like he's checking his air. So we both have a stat read that he's checking his air. Because if he's not betting very often, then he's probably just betting all his good stuff, checking his air. That's usually the case. Usually people don't play completely backwards like that. Like just randomly bet 30% of your air and then check the nuts. That's usually a little weird. So, if you see people say they're betting in position in this spot, like 30% of the time, 40% of the time, and we have the read that he folded on the river, now you can start thinking about just check folding a flop when you've got like 10s and 9s. Although don't check 9s if you know the river's coming in 9. But you get the idea there. So we can make actually quite a few adjustments from that sort of situation. So I don't want to get too off topic here, but you can see, you can use this as a bluff, but I would usually wait to have the read to do it. And you can use it as a value bet. And here's a specific situation where this will come up, and you can do it as a bluff. Another situation might be, if you check called out of position on the flop, on this board texture, especially like say under the gun open, And now, sorry, I don't have an example. This kind of just came to me off the top of my head, so sorry this isn't super visual. But say under the gun opens, you call in the big blind, and this flop comes down, and you check call. The turn goes check check. That's not a bad spot for you to make a small bet there too. I think half pot's more than enough. I probably wouldn't bet half pot there all that often. Often bet like a third, something like that. And you're gonna get a lot of folds there. Um, in that sort of situation. So that's not a bad thing for you to do with like your busted flush draws and that sort of situation. And it's not a bad thing for you to do when you've got like the old, ace queen, ace jack kind of stuff, ace 10 suited sort of stuff going on right there. So cool. So hopefully that makes sense. And I think this can, really help you guys, again, find some extra profit at the micro stakes. And, like I said, I mean, this is exploitative stuff. So, I mean, this is definitely aimed at the sort of stuff that I've seen from, just from working with guys over the years and, just saying, hey, how's this work out? And it working, so definitely try this stuff out. And let me know how it goes. And let me know if you guys have any questions. This has been threads13 for deucescrack.com.